hour to converse about the state of the nation. And Martha, we really appreciate you. And I know she's also a party leader that is now Kenya. And also she has come up with a book, and I know she'll explain why did she come with this book, and how can we get that book and get knowledge on this book. Senior Counsel, you can say hi to the audience. They have been waiting for you. You can just give open remarks, then we're going to give you a platform to share your idea on state of the nation. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone, and sorry that I've joined late. I'll give very few remarks because I don't know what has gone on in the last half hour. But I will say that our state of the nation, we are in a very, very bad place. Our constitution has been virtually suspended. The state of human rights, again, we are in a very dark place where the administration continues to violate human rights with abandon. Abductions by state agents, and these abductions, we once said in a presser with Professor Kibwana and others that the state operatives who are in a squad, an abduction squad, are working in cahoots with state, security agencies from Uganda and several other East African countries, and as far as DRC. Those who may have thought it was a joke, you saw for yourself last Sunday when Dr. Kizza Besigye was abducted from Nairobi. They tried to deny it, but the Ugandans have let the cat out of the bag. They are saying they went with him by road, and they were definitely given access and assisted by Kenyan security agencies. And this is not the first time. In July this year, 36 members of Dr. Besigye's party were in a training session in Kisumu and were similarly abducted, taken to Uganda and detained, and recently were released. Apart from that, our own nationals are being abducted every day by masked police officers or state agencies. We are told they comprise a few people from the army, a few from the police, and mainly Mr. Ruto's ethnic group, but there are a few others from other communities. And this is a squad that is operating outside of the police force. It is commanded from God knows where, but we suspect from the very seat of power. The state of economy, no good at all. We are sinking deeper and deeper into debt. Debt that is not being used to give services to Kenyans or to build the economy. Money that is being wasted for the comfort of those in power. We have seen the collapse of our health insurance, the NHIF. The Ruto regime ran it down. In the 2 years they have been in power, in its place, they have brought Chief Shah, we don't know which is which, a system that after almost a month of being in operation has caused untold suffering. Maybe one day there will be an audit to know how many people have died or suffered because of it. But we have seen it in the media. Some have experienced it with loved ones. Education is in a mess. New funding model at the university, which we are all demanding should be withdrawn, that actually works against the children of the most vulnerable, and is actually reversing gains in education. And it's not just at the university. Secondary schools are suffering. The capitation is not released on time. The hurriedly implemented CBC is also causing problems. And the insistence of the regime on prioritizing contracts to build classrooms at a time we know that every secondary has space for Form 1 and 2, and therefore junior secondary can easily be accommodated in secondary schools, which allows even sharing of the teachers. Corruption, outright theft of government funds. In a word, lack of accountability and transparency. And we've seen it firsthand where the Adani contracts were done in a very opaque manner. Ruto and his operatives defending Adani instead of defending Kenyans who were outrightly a majority opposed to the contract. So Adani had the government of India speaking for him and the government of Kenya, and Kenyans had no one but the courts and the many voices that spoke together. Kenyans have been vindicated with Adani's indictment in the US. This is not the only opaqueness. There is opaqueness in contracts awarded for extracting natural resources and especially minerals in this country. We are sinking into debt at a time we are told that we have so many minerals, which if managed well, would get us out of debt. In a nutshell, we are in a total eclipse, as I said on another forum. If Moi era was dark era, this is a total eclipse. There is no light, and we have a duty as Kenyans to stand up, fight for our motherland, and ensure that our constitutional order is restored, human rights are respected, our money is used for the benefit of Kenyans, not the luxury of a few, and that there is good governance and we get quality services in health, in education, and in every other aspect that Article 4 reflected, and we get our basic rights. Let me leave that as the opening statement.
Thank you so much, Senior. As I bring back to my co-host Redemptor and Abdi on the platform, we are happy also to have Honorable Neto. I see you down there. You can have a mic and come up. You're one of the people who are making this platform to run on. Senior Counsel, I see you're saying that these are opaque. And another thing, I know you're gonna come in again to talk about. We saw the statement, or when the president was giving the statement, or William Ruto, last 2 days, and canceled the Adani deal, but still she and Shah, I don't know the way being called, and is still on, and also the adoption of BCJ. These are the things that's so unfortunate. Abdi, back to you. I see Neto came in, Honorable Neto. I don't know, Neto, if you can give your open remark. And then our key speakers today is Council Honorable Martha Karua, Tina Council, and Kivuta Kibwana, Prof. Abdi or Redemptor.
Redemptor, go ahead. Thank you, Honorable Mother Karua. Welcome. Looking forward to this exciting conversation. Actually, thank you for your comprehensive, thought-provoking submission. You have eloquently captured and intertwined crisis of corruption, lack of accountability, the mismanagement of public debt, and their ripple effect on the critical sector like education, health, and economy at large. As you pointed out, corruption remains the root cause draining the resources that could otherwise fund equitable education, sustainable healthcare, job creation, public debt. Meanwhile, it has become a stronghold of our economy. I think we are at a critical juncture. Time has come for a bold leadership and structural reforms that we must push transparency, accountability in use of public funds to enhance institutional framework of our resources also. So having said that, there is a question from our listener also. I'll post back to There is a question I'll post back also to Professor with the questions from Wambui, that one of our listeners is asking, Ruto has asked for time. What's going to change? He has asked for time to have time to change. Two, is there an exit clause in the Adani contract, or is there a penalty that is there? Thank you. Redemptor, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, we will stand guided in this conversation, remembering we're addressing the state of the nation. Governance issue is going to be big, corruption, and then discuss a bit of the Adani deal. But I want to jump straight to the topic of leadership and integrity. And I would want to add in the two main speakers, I would like to add about courage. Now, we had someone who was here a minute ago and asked that when we get these leaders, we tend to shy and we start paying homage to them, and we do not ask them the hard question. We are not looking for a journalistic moment where you get the opportunity to kind of tell them off. But I want to take this opportunity because I have been documenting about our leaders for the longest time. I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge that today, because we'll have other days, we will bring other leaders. But today we've brought two people who can gel in terms of they're both very senior lawyers, and they also fought for the second liberation. Now, I kind of have a soft spot for women leaders in the element of how they are bashed for that one thing they do, that we forget about their leadership qualities, we forget about their integrity, and we go for the politics, and we go and we take this one moment of election disputes. The older people have a responsibility to share with the younger generation where we've come from as a nation. And if I was to share a moment of the Honorable Mother Karua's life, and the most proud moment for me is right now we are facing dictatorial tendencies. Some will call it outright a dictator. We lived with a dictator. Things got so bad in this country that we hated watching TV. But there was a moment all of us had a glimpse of hope. And that was the moment when the president, Moi, went to Kirinyaga, and Honorable Karua was the MP, and they denied her an opportunity to speak in that gathering. And it's still ingrained in my brain, the lady walking out on the dictator. And her constituents shouted, just to honor her. And the TVs captured that moment. And that moment, those who do not know, is where we get the Iron Lady from. Because she dared a dictator. She said, you cannot come to my turf and mistreat me. And then I sit here and hear you tell us lies about what you're doing for my people. And she walked away, and that was a moment. And I feel I would want to blame some of these great leaders because they are so humble in a way. They do not blow their own trumpet, and they allow some people to come and just take one incident and keep drumming it out. Some of us who know who the real liberators know about their integrity, and I'm not here to blow the whistle for these two, but I'm telling you, I've been to Makueni documenting the public participation, and I'll also finish by mentioning someone who's not here because I want to mention them in a positive light. I had the opportunity to attend the book launch of Emeritus Chief Justice Mutunga. And just like the person who came here and raised their hand and wanted to ask a question, they said, you had a moment to change the destiny of this country during the dispute of the elections as a Chief Justice. And he very calmly asked that man, which political party do you belong to? Because he already knew that question was an attack, because this person was holding a grudge because of election disputes. Ladies and gentlemen, our young people are telling us, we know the history, and then we are giving them the skewed history of hatred, the tribal bigotry, the naming and shaming of people just because of the tribe they come from. And so I just had to do that because we need to talk about the leadership integrity we are looking for. And we are in this trouble because we have wash people leading this nation. We have people who cannot even account for the wealth they go to state when they are being appointed. So when we get an opportunity to meet some of these leaders, it will be exciting to tell them off. But let's also give flowers where they are due. So Mother Karua, there's one gentleman who has told me to tell you, you've been the most consistent politician this country has ever had. And it is unfortunate that the games that are played in politics do not have room for women of integrity. So let's get that all out of the way so that if you have an opportunity to ask these people questions, that is not one of the questions we want to entertain. That is, tukikutana mkutano wa ODM na NAC, we will have a shouting match. But let's look at this opportunity as a way to try and get out the best, and they can tell us the lessons they've learned, the games that are played in the political arena, so that when the young people listen to our conversation, they don't leave here always saying Mother Karua did this and Kibwana did this. Let's look at some of these people that you try to shame are the reason why we have devolution, their track record, when they've been ministers. You can, if you have anything against them in terms of integrity, please share. Asanteni. Oh, there was a mic that was on, so it's kind of, Professor, your mic is still on. So I had to do that, and the opportunity, of course, for Mother to know that this is a safe space. We are not here to attack people who serve this country. The last thing I would like to say is, as we talk about femicide, when we talk about femicide right now, there is a culture that was created by the older women, the human rights defenders, the champions for justice, the founders of organizations like FIDA, and every time there was a case that was affecting the women in this country, you saw these women come together, you saw them rush to the hospital, make statements, go to court, and change the law so that they would protect the women. And Mother is one of those ladies who was involved. Now, the femicide, Martha Karua, I would like you to address the 100 million that has been given, because I feel we had a discussion that feels like an haste. And so the last thing is, I've asked, where are the mothers of this nation? And I'll say this, every time we've seen the young political activist being arrested, she has presented herself not just as a leader, but as a mother of the nation. So I want to do that. And if you have any other questions in regard to the topics of today, the state of the nation, the femicide, the money being allocated for this and that, that is why we are hosting this space. Or I am biased because I respect people who serve this nation, and I always tell them, thank you for your service. Now, mnaweza wabash because I've already given them their flowers. Asanteni.
Thank you so much, Redemptor. I think our focus is state of the nation, and we are here to discuss the issues, and we want to come up with a solution. And that's why we invite these leaders. I want to support what you're saying, that we invite them to get the knowledge that they have and things that have been happening, because they have been in the system for a while, and to know what way forward. How can we get this country in another level? Honorable Neto, I see you on mic. I know you've been here, and some few weeks you've been busy. You can say hi to the audience, and also if you have anything to chime in before the Prof and Senior Council coming again.
Thank you very much, Hilary. And it's an honor to be sharing a speaking moment with Professor Kibwana and also the Honorable Martha Karua, two respectable Kenyans who are well known to me, and I've engaged with them in our political life. I've engaged with them as politicians and as leaders, but of course as senior lawyers in my profession. I think, first of all, again, is to apologize. I've been away for the past 2 weeks trying to make sure that Kenya is better. We've been trying to do politics, machinani. That's why I've not been able to be on the calls. But on the topic of the day, I think we have no state, we have no nation. It is very complicated. The state of the nation is brutish. And it is it gores my heart that we can actually be sitting here discussing the nation in this particular manner, when people paid by blood and limb to get Kenya to a democratic state. We've seen a presidency who does not respect the constitution, doesn't respect the rule of law. I had a chance to, I didn't watch him speak in the nation, I was busy, but I read the State of the Nation address, and I think it is very annoying that they can actually, that's what he presented to the people. It's very annoying. He was below par, and I think he was just, he was calling out our bluff. One, on corruption, I think he said nothing, he said zero. It was basically empty talk. We know that this government is the most corrupt. And the CS Treasury himself, yesterday or 2 days ago actually has said, I confirmed that they still lose 2 billion shillings a day to corruption. In fact, he's appealing to his colleagues that they should actually cut it down to even, they should steal less. They should steal 500 million. So 1.5 billion can then be saved to stop us from going to beg for debt. So that simply shows you that if the presidency was serious, then we would have been doing better. So he gave no milestones in terms of how we want to stem corruption. He gave no milestones. He instead ended up, giving his the usual empty promises rather than lies. The second thing in terms of education, look, Moi University, which is in his backyard, there's sometimes when you're even selfish for your own neighborhood, the mothers, the women who are selling vegetables to those institutions, or the workers, people who used to benefit from Moi University. The university has collapsed because his colleagues, his friends want to steal the land to plant maize. They're wondering, the universities in Kenya producing livestock in the name of members of parliament and other elected leaders. So his colleagues are thinking that instead of letting the university go to waste, make these people livestock early. Our university is collapsing right before our eyes. The funding model is not working. Why do you want to fix things that are already working? The funding model was working. Why do you want to fix it? The health insurance fund was working. Why do you want to fix it? So this is I don't know why it's carrying out very expensive experiments. But the third thing with regard to extrajudicial killings, when he blamed, he didn't give us nothing about extrajudicial killings. In fact, I think he said people should reach out to IPOA should be doing its work, or femicide, I don't know what he said. But listen, the only reason why people vote in government is to give them security, life, liberty, and pursue happiness. So if you have a government in place and you cannot pursue happiness, if you do not have liberty, if you do not have life, then that's not a government in place. That's the reason why I say there's no state of the nation. Because the only reason why we wake up in the morning to go to vote is that we are hoping that this person we give the sword is going to be someone who can promise us a life, liberty, and let us pursue happiness. On rule of law, I do not support Gachagua, and of course he was horrendous as deputy president. But the manner in which he was handed out of office makes us beg a question as to the process and rule of law issues. He should have been removed, but have been removed procedurally. It goes without saying, and everyone knows it, that the president should have apologized to us for having bribed the House of Parliament, for having bribed the Senate, and it's out there that money exchanged hands in the corridors, and that is the reason why the Gazette notice after Gazette notice. You cannot run a country like that. You cannot run the country by the whims of one man in a way that you want to press buttons and you dance the way you want. That's not what the Constitution of Kenya 2010 anticipates. That you can impeach a deputy president, you can impeach the president, but at least there needs to be order in terms of what you do. Youth unemployment, which is something that comes close to my heart, the president said nothing about it. Instead, he said, we know half the Gen Zs are in the streets because the economic issues were tough, youth unemployment was soaring, and, so a presidency was just failing and austere by the young people and commits nothing about youth unemployment. The Hustler Fund, which was introduced and hallowed, turned out to be for theft. People borrowed the Hustler Fund. If at all it exists, I don't even know how it operates. People borrowed it, stole it, and didn't return, and they're no longer proud of it. When they came into office, the only thing that the administration was talking about was how the Hustler Fund was going to transform the nation. That hasn't happened. So with regard to youth unemployment, the president said nothing about value chain addition. He said nothing about how to make sure that most of our young people go to work, because now the education is collapsing. You have many in the informal sector. And so with a youth unemployment, the youth budget is spiraling. How are we going to run the nation? I want to land by saying his pet project right now, which is the housing project, is an ill-conceived project, hopelessly thought through. And I do not understand how the presidency continues to build houses in Embu worth 4 million shillings, and you can get an acre of land and put a better house. You're putting up houses in a rock where you can get an acre of land for 1 million shillings and put in so much money. The problem of copying exams and even copying the student's name is that, I think part of the problems the president wanted to solve with his housing project was, during the economic depression, the U.S. president, looking at how to jumpstart the U.S. economy, put in, a labor-intensive sort of program, which was then able to make money circulate in the economy. But that's not what we do with the housing project. There have been previous experiments in Kenya before with the Road 2000, those of you who are old enough, where you put money directly to places where there's going to be circulation of money in the communities, but also making use of that project that we're building. This housing project is another conduit for stealing. I really think men and women of valor, men and women of character need to team up together and fight for the soul of the nation, because that until then we'll have the state of our nation. Thank you very much, Hilary, for giving me a chance.
Thank you, Dr. Neto. Thank you for the powerful submission. Before I give it back to Redemptor, also in regards to the state of the economy, we have one of our panelists, Bonnie Mwangi, who will give us a quick overview, and then we cycle back to our guests. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abdi. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Thank you, Bonnie.
I appreciate it. So I want to focus my remarks on what I think is at the center of this issue that we have in our country, which is the growing gap between the average Kenyan and our political class, what I like to call the 2% versus the 98%. And I'll just mention a few things. If you think about our economy, where we are, and all you have to do is start off with the president's speech, right? So he talked about what he believes his government has accomplished in 2023. He talks about improving our shilling by 20%. He talks about inflation falling by 2.7%. He talks about the GDP growing by 5.6%. But all of you live in Kenya. If you don't live in Kenya, you visit Kenya often, right? You're able to go to restaurants. You're able to order meals. You know that cost of living is not going down, it's going up. You know that Kenyans are having a hard time affording life. You know that Kenyans are seeking jobs and they're not getting jobs. So, you have a president that's telling you to suspend your own experience, to suspend what you can see with your own eyes, to believe him. And this is part of this government, right? They are telling you to believe things that you know not to be happening. They tell you that they care for you, that they are working to better your lives. But every time you look at what they are doing things to better themselves and their families as opposed to you. When the president is telling you that the economy grew by 5.6%, he doesn't tell you that his government borrowed an additional 15%. The last 10 years, our country has borrowed almost 10 trillion. Every time we have a budget deficit of about $1 trillion that we add to our balance sheet. So the economy might grow by 5.6%, but we added our whole, so to speak, on the balance sheet by 18%, 15%. So for every 1% that we are getting in GDP growth, we are spending 3 times that. And you don't have to be a genius to know that that's not going to work over the long term. So we wake up in our country spending 60% of our tax revenues on just paying interest alone. And you don't have to be a genius again to think about what that means from a country. If we are losing 60% of our income to interest, think about all the missed opportunities in terms of our ability to provide services to our citizens, in terms of our ability to invest in our infrastructure, in things like healthcare, in things like education. It's dumb leadership that leads to a situation like this. And the president has no interest whatsoever to deal with that issue, right? We are talking about growing the economy by 5.6% when you've given up 60% of your income as a country. Tell me what country in the world that's good, that you will look up to, that's doing this, that's behaving this way with people's money. So it's a gap, right? The president tells you that this is what we are doing for you, but you know better. You go to restaurants, you order food, you go to a supermarket, you buy things, and you know that you're having a hard time affording. So we spend a lot of time talking, but we are not really communicating. We are not talking to each other because the president and his government are stuck on giving you the message. Take an example of something like what I would call imposed solutions. The president tells Kenyans that I know what you need. We're going to give you free housing. Not free housing, but we're going to give you housing. We're going to give you healthcare. And yet, when you look at these people and you ask, the senior government officials that are out in the media selling these solutions, you ask them about the specifics, about the economics of their own proposals. They can't speak to them. If you've seen an interview with Sam Gituku questioning the PS for health about the economics and the the economics and the general practicality of their proposed solution, they can't speak to that, right? Because we are electing people that have never done anything, they have never led anything, they have absolutely no idea what it means to actually serve people. We put them in positions, we come up with policies, spend a lot of time selling those policies, but when people are questioned about them, they can't speak to them. And so Kenyans ask questions, and then we are told you don't understand. We know what you need. Again, it speaks to the gap, this gap that we have between the citizens and the government. When the government is telling you that we believe that you need housing, and the government is having a hard time giving you your kids basic education. I mean, if I was to call the people that are on this call, where you send your kids to school, I bet you 95% of the people are going to say their kids are going to private school. Why is that? The government already has a responsibility to provide education, but they're not doing it. But now they're moving into telling you that they're going to give you housing. And they wouldn't even do what they're supposed to do right now to the best of their abilities, but they're telling you that they're going to do other things. Mention the last thing. We see a government that's spending a lot of time talking to Kenyans, talking down to Kenyans, telling you that they are dealing with corruption. We've talked about corruption in this country for 40 years, and yet nothing happens. The president tells you that we're going to deal with corruption. Yet, at the same time he's doing this, he's electing and embracing thieves into his own government. You see me talk about people like Evans Kidero, who plundered billions from the citizens of Nairobi. Guess what? Within the last week, he was appointed to another position in government to head a national corporation. Okay, how is that possible? Tell me a country where the president embraces a known thief, someone who stole billions from citizens. The individual that we're talking about has court cases to this day, but the president appoints him to lead a national corporation. The president appoints people like Governor Nok, someone who stole billions from the people of Turkana. Think about that. Turkana County has a poverty rate of 80%. 80% of the people in that county cannot afford food. 20% literacy rate. That individual steals billions from that county and gets promoted to a position in State House. He works for you and I. He has a car. He has health insurance. He has other benefits. He has security, courtesy of you and I. So he stole from his citizens, some of the most vulnerable Kenyans, and then he gets appointed to a State House position. So Kenyans can see this, right? When the president tells you that he's fighting corruption, and then at the same time he's appointing thieves into office, we can see this. We are not dumb people, but we are supposed to suspend our own experiences and what we can see with our eyes, and take what the government is saying as gospel. But we know better. We know better. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie, for your submission. And just a quick question from our followers. They're asking actually, with Kenya, I'll leave you to reflect on that question. Meanwhile, we'll cycle back to you. They're asking, with Kenya debt to GDP ratio spiraling out of control, what alternative approaches will you recommend to stabilize the economy and provide a relief to struggling Kenyans? And the other question was, how can the other question is, how can Kenya attract foreign investment without compromising its sovereignty, as seen in the Adani deal cancelled agreement? Anyway, I'll leave you to reflect, or you want to go now?
No, I just wanna react to that quickly. Economics is not as difficult as people make it sound to be. If I polled, the people that are on this call, and I told you that we woke up and we find out that we are spending 60% of our tax revenue on debt. And I said, okay, what do we do as Kenyans, right? What do we do in this situation? We are spending 60% of our tax revenue to pay interest alone. I bet you 95% of you will come up with top 3 solutions. How did we get to this position, right? Well, we have a budget of about 4 trillion. We raise 3 trillion every year, so we have a whole of $1 trillion. Okay, so can we look at where we can cut costs? Our political system. Our politicians are the second highest politicians in the world when you consider the size of our GDP. That means they make more money relative to our GDP than politicians in the US, than Canada, than Germany, than Japan, than Australia. Why is that? Why are we paying our politicians this much money when we are a poor country? So 95% of you will agree that we need to cut costs there. Okay, so we talk about the fact that we lose 800 billion to corruption every year. Our gap is about 1 trillion. I talked about our budget being about 4 trillion and the fact that we raise about 3 trillion. So we have a hole of about 1 trillion. If we just address corruption, even if you cut it by 60 or 70%, you're going to have made a significant progress towards addressing that issue. But when was the last time you heard the president saying that you're going to actually fix it? You can't talk about corruption when you're appointing people like Kedero and Nanok and all these other thieves into office. It doesn't mean anything. There's nothing that we can do when we have, I can talk to people, we love to talk about our constitution and the fact that it's progressive. It doesn't mean a damn thing when the president is appointing thieves into office. How are we supposed to prosecute thieves of public resources when they're the ones that are in these positions? So Kenyans will know that we need to cut costs, and part of what we have to look at is what we pay our politicians. We have a government that is not sustainable, too many politicians, where we don't need to have 47 counties, frankly. We don't need to have as many MCAs as we do right now. So we need to look at that and say, okay, so we need to cut down the numbers, we need to cut down the salaries. And lastly, we spend a lot of time, or you spend a lot of time on my TL, you see my analysis showing the level of wastage where we are spending so much money on these trips abroad for quote unquote benchmarking, quote unquote effective leadership. It's all nonsense. We can save a lot of money by reducing all this travel, all this wastage. If people, again, if we want to solve this issue, we start off by electing the right people that have a different mindset, that know that being in a public position is for you to serve people. It's not for you to charge for these trips abroad. It's not for you to go there and say, okay, well, how can I make some extra money? I'm going to get on a trip to go to Dubai to learn about poverty alleviation, when you can look outside the window and you can see poverty. I mean, these things are not rocket science. So let's think about who we are electing to these positions, because if we think about that, it is not difficult to actually solve this problem. They're not as difficult and complicated as our politicians want you to believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie, for your submission. Thank you addressing the state of the economy. Now we'll cycle back to Professor and then to Hon.Martha Karua. Professor, please go ahead. Thank you.
I think there is the question, and before maybe even going to the femicide question, which has also been directly addressed to Martha by Redemptor, just to say that only from this conversation, let alone conversations that we have been having, first of all, there is absolute knowledge about what is the problem. And I think maybe we need to begin to focus more on the solutions rather than, every time kind of talking more and more about what the problems are, unless new problems are emerging. But I kind of feel that we are getting to the place where the issues are kind of settling or settled. And I hope that in a lot of the conversations that we have, that is probably the direction we will take. Two, even in terms of the knowledge of what are the issues and how they can be sorted out, as has been demonstrated, even in this conversation, by all these eloquent people, and the last one being Bonnie, the people know what should be done. And I think all of us here and in many other spaces are leaders. So it's not like Martha, it's not like or Kia, it's not like myself or whoever. There is leadership here, to drive a proper government, and so I think now the focus really should be how do we create that alternative group that is able to go to Kenyans and get Kenyans to say, yes, we have been waiting, for you. And let me, I will not stay too long in terms of what the president said, because I think many people have said that, this is just a speech to mollify, Kenyans, to not really to tell them a proper assessment of the state of the nation. But I think it's instructive that he talked about citizens are ahead of leadership and they want a listening leadership. and all the questions asked by the people must be answered. And even said there are discussions about whether leaders understand the pain, hardship, and struggles endured by countless citizens every day as they strive to make ends meet, and whether the government is doing anything about it. So you can see it's like more or less laughing at the people saying, you know, this is what you're saying. But then the answer is you can go to hell. You know, in terms of what answers are provided as, you know, this conversation has kind of demonstrated. Now, I want to talk about like this femicide. You know, sometimes you wonder, how come there are abductions? How come there are shootings of young people? How come there is the quarry, the body is deposited at quarry? How come afterwards there is this unexplainable upsurge of femicide? Because it is like an upsurge. So we have to be careful also that some of these things are not also being orchestrated so that there is diversion, you know, by the state. And it's true that there is, you know, significant mental health. That's a huge thing, particularly among even young people. A lot of them, you know, into the very cheap coca, cheap drugs, the alcohol, chrome, some other thing called county, and of course the system knows that these drinks are hurting the young people, are actually disappearing them from social life and from even political life. So it's also intentional because a system normally would say that these drinks are not good and they should not be allowed to be exposed to young people. But having said about the femicide, it is an issue that must be addressed. And there were those groups like PIDA, you know, there were groups that, you know, were doing that work and are doing this work. But some of this 100 million, we have to be careful whether it is being deployed to the 16 days of activism so that government people go all over the county, all over the counties, trying now to do something about femicide. So that again, instead of the money going to groups and through, you know, proper, you know, through parliament or whatever it is in a proper way, it is not actually used for government to endear itself, to try to endear itself to appear to be solving problems, using it to go to the counties. That is something that we need to look at. And there was an earlier question asked about the religious sector, that the religious sector appears to have kind of waken up. And of course, the Gen Zs were very harsh, rightly so, to the religious sector because it had abated the coming into power, you know, of this system. And I think we have to be careful so that when we have allies or their allies who have begun to say that they don't like what has been happening, if you are very hard on them again, you're chasing them away from the support of progressive forces, and because allies are important. The Gen Zs, the civil society, the faith people, eventually the business class. You have to, the more you get people on your side, the more you weaken a system that is predatory. And so people also have to be very, very, very strategic in terms of how do you woo people to your side. And I think maybe there are people here on this call who are political scientists, but it is clear that the president is not, you know, maybe sleeping a lot of the time. He's strategizing because if you get, for example, Raila on your side, if you have all of parliament on your side, and of course he was saying that like the gender rule, the 2/3 has not been achieved, but he has all the parliament on his side, and even the court said you can dissolve parliament the Chief Justice wrote to the president, you can dissolve a parliament if they don't, pass this legislation. So why doesn't he do that? And why doesn't he get all these people who do what he tells them to do the necessary? So you can see it's again taking back issues to like the IPOA, what was stated, the IPOA by NATO, and so on, and he knows that IPOA has been, if I can use this word, it has been kind of castrated. So that again is quote strategy. But now we have been told that the principal secretaries have not been working. So now it's necessary to make new ones. We have been told now there must be a more focused performance contract and all that. So you can see those are strategies that are being used, whether it is getting political people, parliament, whether it is getting, the new permanent secretaries and so on, because it appears like initially he brought on board people who supported him to kind of say, you did a good job, you supported me. And now he's saying, okay, it looks like things are not working. Let's get the new breed so that we can get 2027. So one asks, is what is happening because of incompetence? Or is it a strategy to impoverish the people so that during 2027 elections, you can buy them easily? So that 2026, 2027 are handouts years where you say hustler, you can get it without even having to pay it. And there's a lot of, money going everywhere, bribing leaders, the kind of weak leaders, bribing the citizens and all that kind of stuff, especially rural folk. So we have to ask ourselves, and this is not yet time for like way forward, but we have to ask ourselves, the corruption thing, because if we deal with that, and Bonnie, talk to that, if we deal with this tribalism, this culture of, people complain, and then at the end, they're all put under the yoke of tribalism, even educated people, even intellectuals, even whoever, we go back to the tribal thing. Just like in America, where I think there is some eminent professor from Kennedy School of Government, who said America has gone back to bad politics, to really something very, 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 a culture of doing things the bad way. We have been doing that in Kenya and in a lot of the African countries where, we complain and then finally we still support what hurts us, and we get into the handouts, and we get into the the state using IEBC or the electoral body, using instruments of the state and resources to give itself power. We have talked a lot about civic education. There isn't proper mechanism for making sure that in the 1,450 wards, it is really happening. But maybe finally, to talk about I think the question which was asked about the church, I think I've answered that, and the faith general, not just the church, that when they say that this is not right, like happened in the 90s, and even happened during Mau Mau, and so on, then one must not continue criticizing them when they are saying that now we can see that this is not working. There should be support so that the more you get allies, you secure them. You don't tell them, you have done so many things in the past, we don't trust you. Of course, if they go back, then they are called out, because if they do now things that are counter the new move, then they are told, no, we want you to stay firm. The courage that Redemptor was talking about. But I think as maybe towards the end of this, and I have a class tomorrow, so I have also to prepare for my class. But I think we really need to say what is the way forward, and be firm, and because unless we can show to Kenyans that there is an alternative, then Kenyans will say, okay, maybe these people will change. Maybe they are calling more people, into this broad-based stuff, and maybe it will be better. And because that has been the history of our 60 plus years of independence. And I learned by saying you cannot underestimate the president and these guys who are coming together, because when they feel that there are people who are planning seriously to get them out, then they come together. And what I call the old canoe, keeps on coming together, and we think they are different, and then they come together, they are not different. So we really have to, be very focused in terms of what needs to be done. And I learned.
Redemptor, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor. There are so many things. We are going through so many things. Even when we have conversations, we don't know which one to tackle first. Back to you, Honorable Martha. Governance, corruption, and Adani, and the specific one, because you're lawyers. Is there a way of undoing some of these things? Like if these deals are made and we take our country back in terms of where we are. So address the corruption and then maybe the economy and then the checks and balance, or whatever you had prepared for us. But I would like that to guide our conversation. Asante.
Okay, do we have time? I am seeing 3 hands. Do we have time that you can take the 3 hands and then I come in?
Okay, that's fine. I needed your permission to do that. So Wanjiro, I think Wanjiro has a question for you, and then we can have Farah.
Wanjiru dropped. I think
Wanjiro?
you can go on, and then Kenya for Kenyans.
Yes, Farah?
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, you are loud and clear.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, Hillary, the Redemptor, Abdi, thank you for the consistency. I totally agree with what Professor Kivuta has said, because we cannot keep on discussing problems. Hatuwezi tukakaa, we will waste our time and our opportunity and our efforts just discussing the issues. One thing I believe in is, just as all of these things are happening concurrently, we must also have the space and the capacity to let all of this coexist within ourselves and at the same time find solutions. I've been lucky enough to be one of the few people who got Martha Karua's book early, and on the preface, the last paragraph, she starts with a line that says, every generation stands on the shoulders of the previous generation. And this is something I totally identify with, and I believe that in our African culture, every generation is supposed to empower the next generation to be better than them and basically move humanity forward. And with this, we have a lot of problems as a country, but amongst ourselves, we have more than solutions. We actually have solutions that can take Kenya much further ahead than where we are today, or where some of us envision this country might have been in the next couple of years. But this requires our collective efforts together. Si mambo ya wewe unataka kitu fulani, or somebody else wants something else specifically. The reality is Kenya will not change until we as a people change. Because hakuna vile utaitisha, you will not demand good leadership if you're not a good citizen yourself. So my question to Martha and Kivuta and everybody else here as well is, we understand the scopes of our problems, and the only way we can come up with a solution, in my opinion, is analyzing each department and coming up with solutions that are tailor-made for this country and this economy, and understanding them for ourselves, whereby we would really require the help of people like Martha and Kivuta in forming a national think tank, a people's think tank that comes up with solutions for the people, and nobody's going to pay you. And we can guarantee you that all we want is your loyalty and love for this nation, because reading Martha's book, Mwanjogu's influence is enough for her to love this country. And to sum it up, yani kuileta tu ikuwe rahisi, would you, the older generation, be willing to come up, to sit down, create a think tank, especially you people who have been influential and have been people of integrity, come up with a think tank that will come up with specific solutions that are tailor-made for this country, regardless of whether you stand to benefit or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Farah. Always a pleasure that you embrace the intergenerational Gen Zote. Kenya for all.
Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to speak. My name is Lynette Kieti, and I'm based in the US. I wanted to just start very briefly to talk about the state of the nation, because that's the topic. And the state of the nation, in my mind, should be determined by the citizens. And given that, it is very clear that the state of the nation is bleak and the state of the nation is in shambles. And so we really need to think about, just like some speakers before me have said, let's not focus too much on what has been and maybe spend as much time on what we can do to move ourselves forward and out of this state. And I feel that we need to focus about how do we remove the current leadership, whether it's now or it's during the elections. How do we, if it's not now and it's during the elections, what can we do to help Kenyans survive until that time? And what can we do to replace the current leadership? And of course, this is a very important question, and it's pertinent at this moment, because I foresee a situation where we can all see that it's sort of a train wreck, and we don't do enough now, that in the end we run out of time and we end up with the same leadership again. So we have to, as the speaker before me mentioned, we have to focus on many things. And also, as Professor said, we have to have specific targets and specific people following different avenues and having deliverables and making sure that we get this, we start all the processes to get this forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we bring Mother Redemptor, can we give Dr. Milton 2 minutes also to wrap up his submission? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Abdi. Thank you, Redemptor. And I want to salute Professor Kibwana's sentiments and Honorable Martha Karua for what she has said. I think I'm on the same page with Professor, that we already know what the issues are. We already know what's not working. We now need to go into the practical steps that we need to take to make sure that this leadership that is doing everything against the will of the Kenyan people um, is taken out, and we can have responsible leaders taking over, and we can be able to ventilate on those areas as we go along. So my practical steps are, I'm going to address myself to two broad areas, and give my proposals in terms of what I think can be able to get us onto the next step and across the line. And of course, I say so with a lot of humility, that this script has already been written. All we need to do is pick it up from the yesteryears, and Martha and Prof have already been through this, and they could be able to advise and share how we can modify the ideas that we have, to modify the script that worked in the 90s and 80s, so that we are able to achieve a template that works for the present times. So, number one, on the issue of corruption and fidelity to the rule of law, I think my way of looking at it is that we need a way forward where we can establish pressure groups which can initiate course of action in courts. And here we can have multiple suits on different issues. Again, different caucuses can be able to bring these causes of action, so that one, for example, we put pressure and demand that all government deals be made public. This is critical, starting with the Adani one as a starting as the first step. We must be able to demand that everything that this government has got its hands on be made public, because those are public documents. There is no reason that Kenyans cannot have access to them, or government will hold on to them. So the different ministries and state agencies that have gone into contract or into any arrangement with entities that are either local or foreign, we need to know what this government is signing the country into, and we can do so through multiple suits, different entities going to court and saying, hey, this is what we need, so that we have those documents, court orders that are very specific. Make these documents public. Number two, we need to have the courts being moved in such a way that they can stay execution, or they can stay certain policy decisions by this government, by this administration, that are counter the aspirations of the Kenyan people. Where there is no public participation, we already have a template that those decisions cannot be implemented. Um, Look, because this government has demonstrated that it will do things and hope that nobody is seeing, and those things will be used against the Kenyan people. We must be able to stop that. We need to be able to have a review and an audit of every single decision that has been taken by any of the government entities, and calling for greater accountability on that. We can also go ahead and demand for a publication of the public debt portfolio. This has been said so many times. We keep told how government is paying our debt, or our debt has matured and we are paying this disbursement and that. Nobody knows what that money was used for, how that money was used. We keep hearing of how money never came to the consolidated fund. But every other day, we are being told how we are supposed to be paying, how we are paying interest. What are we paying interest on? How much money came into Kenya? Where was that money deployed? And it is in our constitution that you cannot borrow for recurrent expenditure. So if money was borrowed for development, which specific projects was that money used? That is the detail of how the public debt portfolio needs to be published. And we could have the courts, and we could even, in my view, seek audience at the International Court of Justice, or there are international bodies where Kenyans can seek audience and get orders, where the country and whoever we owe the money can be brought to book in a way that Kenyans are aware of how much they are paying, how much came in, and where it went to. And if there is corruption involved, we are able to say we are not paid, can't pay, won't pay if there is no value for our money. The other thing I want to address myself to as the last issue is the issue of abductions and femicides. Now, it is confirmed that the terror squad that is responsible for abductions and even the femicides that are happening is comprising fellows that are not even citizens. We have people from as far as DRC who are responsible for this. What is our course of action? First, we need to get a list of and engage with all these families. Once we have the list, this inventory will help us get the families to sue IPOA, to sue the IG for failure to protect their family members. And we have individual officers who have been identified already. Can we have a course of action against these individuals, so that we can have them come out and say they were taking instructions and acting um, on instructions from certain people? That way, we are raising the accountability bar and making it impossible for anybody being used or being given illegal orders from acting on those orders or instructions. Now, the last point I am going to make about this is citizens, we need to engage our rural folks. And this is where, again, I would call upon all of us. There is vernacular media. We cannot trust the mainstream media, as it were, because of the possibility of being compromised. But do we have alternatives? Yes, we have alternative media outlets. We have alternative media materials that we can produce to reach out to the people. Grassroots mobilizations modeled on the Nyumba Kumi initiative, like I said the last time I addressed this space. We have an opportunity to use the Nyumba Kumi model to be able to mobilize people at the village level. We need to identify those people and start moving. I'm glad that Martha is here. I'm glad that Prof is here. We can be able to use the NAR Kenya and the political party structures that exist to be able to reach down to the people and have this message getting down there. Prof, your success as governor of Makueni County is something that we need to borrow from so that we begin creating this kind of grassroots penetration so that the people who are going to listen to these masqueraders, these dealers addressing them from top of the vehicles, who are going down to the villages and trying to dish out money that is stolen from Kenyans, pretending to care for them. That is where we need to reach so that the people can begin to ask the hard questions. And lastly, I know IEBC is not in place yet. And probably, I dare say that William Ruto has no intention of having the IEBC back because he probably doesn't want to see any by-election happening. He doesn't want to see any electoral processes being undertaken because he knows that this will be a referendum against his failed leadership. So, can we have our people mobilized to start recalling of MPs initiatives going on and being undertaken by pressure groups and different non-state actors so that we start signature collections, we start filing of those petitions in the High Court so that MPs will not sit pretty. I do believe that if these initiatives are going on, then we can have a more engaged citizenry and we can rebuild to another June 25th in the near future or even before the end of the year if we are able to take those initiatives and if we are able to continue consistently being on these spaces and speaking out. And like I have said, Kurunzi News is available to continue with the engagements. Pressure Point is always available. We can continue to do so. If there is material that needs to be produced and put out there, Kurunzi News is available. We will have those stories and those in that content that the mainstream media is being apathetic to, we can publish it on Kurunzi News so that the people get to know. We can be able to continue engaging by way of interviews in even where those other mainstream media entities are not able to do it. And lastly, in conclusion, do we have people who have frequencies that they are not using? Can we come together and caucus and begin to sustain that pressure? Create that alternative media outlets that will help get the word out there using vernacular, using whatever means that is legal to be able to do this. Last and in conclusion, I know I stand to be accused of propagating terrorist narratives, but that is not the point. We need to adopt the terrorist mentality in terms of military precision with which they execute their plans so that we can run William Ruto and these dealers and cabal out of town. Any extra day that they continue being in office is a disservice to our people, and our people continue dying because this leadership has no interest in serving the Kenyans. It has only care for how much they will loot, how much they will make, and how much they will amass for themselves illegally. We can deploy the terrorist mentality or mindset in terms.
We lost Dr. Milton. Dr.
No,
Milton, you need to land.
Yeah, I'm landing. I'm just saying we need to mobilize. We need to start hitting the ground running so that we can get our people emancipated. As it is right now, it is getting worse by the day. And an extra day without action is a disservice to our people who are in slavery and bondage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Milton. Thank you very much, Honorable Mother, for your patience. And now I give you the mic and a few minutes to make your submissions. Asante.
Okay, I'll try to be very fast. And I want to acknowledge that we have worked previously very well with Dr. Neto. He's a promising younger leader, if he can allow me to call him that, because I'm a senior citizen. And also we work and still work with Professor. And I want to let you all know that according to Article 132 of the Constitution, the State of Nation address should come immediately at the end of each year. So we ourselves held the State of Nation address on the 17th of September, because the Ruto year ended on, second year ended on 13th. And we included many issues. We are going to repost it afresh on our timelines for you to see how we responded to those issues. There is a great opportunity for action following the Gen Z protests. The bar of accountability was raised high because for the first time, they interrogated the issue of Harambes. If you remember, Occupy churches, which frightened churches to cancel fundraisers, and which seems now to be forgotten by the regime. And you have seen Ruto moving around, dishing out money, more money than he would earn in 5 years in just a few Harambes. And we thank the Catholic Church for leading the way in rejecting the money. Because when we talk of accountability and transparency and how our money is being abused, Harambes are actually the bedrock of corruption. That is what makes leaders require so much money to service their politics. And those who have access to being able to manipulate, steal, or award themselves in spite of conflict of interest tenders in order to get extra money, and also money for campaign and the handouts that are given. All these are part of the corruption. And therefore, we have a great opportunity to carry this conversation forward. And I'm imagining, what if we had these spaces in 47 counties? We all belong to counties. It's like having rallies without mobilizing with much money to have those spaces and this conversation. And this answers the question of civic education. Civic education, I would call it civic engagement. None of us has a monopoly of wisdom. When we come together and share ideas, we are enlightening ourselves, we are affirming ourselves. It is civic engagement that is bound to transform this country. I would like to say that a constitution is as good as the implementers. Our constitution is good. Are those of us who are implementers as good? Are the courts helping us to live our dream? There I'll answer yes and no, because in the magistrates' courts, we have seen a judge or two rejecting trumped-up charges. You remember the Morara charges? We have seen the High Court, and especially the Judicial Review Court, give very good judgments. We have seen other courts come up with very good judgments and others with very repressive judgments. We've also seen sparks of light from the Court of Appeal, and we've seen darkness in the Supreme Court. I think we need to bring the conversation and spotlight, give flowers for the good judgment, and discuss, and with respect, take exception and differ with the bad judgments, because these are the people who are pulling us down. Every professional given an opportunity to serve Kenya must serve Kenya in the way that Kenya should be served. So we must encourage one another. And some of this encouragement is that all these officers come from us, the community. We should be able to bring pressure on them wherever we meet. Anybody implementing any part of the Constitution, whether as a security agent, a judicial officer, or a person seated in the offices, whether a passport office or IEBC, holds their office courtesy of Kenyans, because the sovereignty belongs to the people. Whatever power you have is donated by the people. There appears to be ignorance or refusal to acknowledge this fact, that whatever decision you make must be in the best interests of the people. That is where our institutions are run by you and me are letting us down. That is why we are having femicide unabated, enforcement, investigations. The entire criminal justice system is weak. Not because the law is not good enough, but we refuse to do the right thing. And I want to agree with Professor Kibwana that I suspect some of the femicide is by the law enforcement agencies. You can't tell me that any single Kenyan can decapitate so many females and dump them in quarry without anybody noticing. The speed at which they tried to offload this to a person whom they put in custody and later released was suspect. So yes, we have a breakdown of law and order in the country, and the femicides are high, but I think they are also increased by illegal activities of sections of the law enforcement agencies. Until someone explains quarry and why today that place has not been drained so that we see how many other bodies are there, or whether all bodies were fished out, that remains suspect. We need not just money, and this is not so much about money. It is much more about commitment and enforcement. And if we were interested, if the administration was interested in reducing femicide, beyond enforcement, there will be a campaign, a very serious media campaign. And because the state is not the best in engaging the people, they would partner with civil society organizations, including the church, where we discuss this issue and how to solve it, where we advise young women and all women of all ages and anybody in distress, male or female, what to do, and as a nation, how we can look out for each other to bring this wanton of taking away of lives away. And I want to acknowledge it's the 16 days of activism. And I know that women's organizations, human rights organizations are all together, bringing awareness and holding forums during these 16 days of activism. Very quickly, it is good that we understand that the DNA of William Ruto is lies, more lies. It is also corruption, and it is abetting extrajudicial killings, if not planning them. And therefore, there is no way things are going to change. The elephant in the room is a deficit of trust, a deficit of good leadership. Not because Kenyans do not have good people who can lead, but because collectively, a critical number of citizens have chosen to give bad people positions of leadership. Ruto did not lie who he was. He might have said the things he will do, but there is one thing he never said throughout that campaign. And one time, David D reminded us in a tweet, they never promised to fight corruption. So how on earth did we expect that he would fulfill the promises he was giving without fighting corruption and impunity? Therefore, we say we were deceived, but we were deceived with our eyes open. So we must engage each other in our homes, in forums like this, and agree to refer back to our manual, which is the Constitution, on qualities of a good leader, on Chapter 6, on leadership and integrity, and encouraging one another that we elect leaders of integrity from the MCA right up all the 6 seats to the presidency. We also have to agree that we all grow our dreams. It is not wrong to be ambitious. So I should be led to grow myself and run. Kalonzo should be led to grow his dream and run. Hon.Martha should grow his dream and run. And anybody else who wants to run. But we must all agree that indeed, if what we want is to bring good leadership in Kenya, that Kenya is bigger than any one of us. And that those who want to bring good leadership will at some stage converge and get a method of selecting the person who is likely to be able to dethrone this wicked regime, be the one to carry the flag. If Kenya is greater than me, then I should be happy to have it move on, even if I do not get the trophy of that position of leadership I want. But we must embrace competition and a good way of settling who becomes the flag bearer. Are we coming together as leaders to provide leadership? Yes, we are trying that in various spaces. All the initiatives you see are good, but eventually we should be able to link up. All the progressive forces should link up to be able to find common ground. Can we do a think tank? Yes, it is possible. And this is something people should volunteer to do so that there is information and research on specific issues. And there are very many ways we can do this. So there are two projects I see to save Kenya. One project is the short-term immediate measures. Immediate measures is continue pushing this rogue regime to adopt transparency, to be accountable, and yes, we continue demanding for information. Dr. Milton, we continue doing that. There are very many people in court, even on Adani. Our courts do not always grant us access to information. I have been penalized for asking for information from JSC, and when the court refused to give a stay, I had recently had to pay costs. But this should not deter us, because together we can be able to do it. The next project is the project of running Ruto and his rogue regime out of town. And that is the one that will need, all those projects need research, need a lot of information, and the two feed on each other. And if you ask what we can do right now is to push the regime to stop non-priority spending and redirect that money to people's needs. And there are so many areas of this, but I'll only mention one because people know many. Foreign travel, if you imagine that it's not only Ruto who travels, and Ruto alone by half the year had used But the last year he had used over 18 billion on travel. If you imagine that it's not just him, it's also all the senior officers in all the ministries, all his members of cabinet, the 47 county assemblies, the 47 governors, the more than 470 CECs in the 47 counties, National Assembly, Senate. If you think of that, the amount of for travel is mind-boggling. Redirected, it can be enough for so many things. It can fund education, it can fund health, it can do many other things, and this is just one area. So we must continue, never tire, to ask this regime to stop wasting our money. We should not tire to fight on fighting for the rule of law, for stopping the abductions, both internally and externally. And this one of Bessie has exposed them a lot. So there are many things we can do, and we will not be able to mention all of them here. I just want to agree that we have a job to do, and it is not easy, but it is doable. And we should remember that Sudan of al-Bashir was virtually a police state, a very strong army, long years of service of Bashir, but he ended up in a prison. The same with Egypt. After Tahrir Square, Mubarak, whoever was the president then ended up in prison. China had Tiananmen Square, and that is a closed regime, but there was still a revolution. This is not impossible. We can do it, and really we must do it to save us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, Mother. One of the things we would ask you to do probably before you leave is just tell us a bit about your book and the way forward. I would want Bonnie to ask a question and kindly make your presentations very short. We see all those hands. So Bonnie, you go first.
Thank you. Actually, what I wanted to do is just make some quick remarks. I want to be very brief. I believe that the solution to our problems today are not new laws. We don't need new institutions. We don't need new think tanks. I understand this is a little bit of a contrarian view, but I believe that we don't need to go and invent anything new. Everybody knows that in our country that corruption is illegal, right? Everybody knows that. The penalties for corruption under the law are serious, right? It's not the death penalty, but there are serious consequences. But our constitution and our laws mean absolutely nothing if we are going to elect thieves into office. The constitution and the laws do not enforce themselves. We love to talk about our constitution, how beautiful it is, how progressive it is. But when we look at what's happening today in 2024, it's worse than we ever had, right? What's happening right in our country, in my view, is worse than what was happening in the last days of Moi, right? People are getting picked up arbitrarily on the streets for nothing other than, criticizing their own government or trying to hold the government accountable. You're seeing people, for example, the official or, the leader from Uganda getting picked up in a way that is absolutely shameful. You're seeing corruption everywhere. I mean, we've always had corruption in this country. The difference between the past leaders and their corruption and what's happening now is that the people that are in power right now, they're stealing from you and they're spitting on your face. And then they meet you on X and give you an update, right? They show you their cars, they show you their mansion, they show you their kids graduating from Bremen and all these other fancy schools. So they're not afraid to spit in your face. That's the difference. And so the solution to these issues are not going and inventing new laws or new structures to try and hold them accountable. It's us. We have to look in us and ask ourselves, what have we done to contribute to this? And we need to own up to that. These people that are doing this to you and I, they don't get into office through overthrowing other governments. We put them into those offices. So we have to look at us and say, what have we done? How have we contributed to this mess, and how can we fix it? And so, that's where we need to focus all our efforts on. If we just make sure that we elect the right people, we're going to solve our problems. There is no amount of laws or think tanks or institutions that you can come up with or money that you can dedicate to this issue of corruption that's ever going to overcome the damage that we do to ourselves when we elect thieves into office. I mean, if you elect someone like Governor Sonko, who tells you that he was a thief in Mombasa, who did not complete his jail sentence, he's a known thief, but he tells you that he's reformed, and then you put him into power to lead a county that has a budget of 40 billion. What do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going to happen? We elect a president who has criminal cases. We elect his deputy who has criminal cases. We close our eyes to that, and they get into office, and within a year, they are stealing like there's no tomorrow. You should not be surprised by this, guys. We should not be surprised by this. We need to look in ourselves and ask ourselves, why is it that we keep electing thieves? Why are we doing this to ourselves? If we focus on
Go ahead, Bonnie Land. Thank you.
Yeah, I keep getting muted. I'm not sure. So the point is this: we don't need, in my view, we don't need new institutions. We don't need new laws. We need to be accountable as citizens. Demand better of ourselves. Demand better of ourselves. Do not vote for criminals. Vote for people who have known for integrity, people who have not stolen from you, and people who know what they are doing. That's 90% of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonu. Before we head to our speakers so that they can also go, I will give Wanjiru a minute and then we can divulge into the book Redemptor was talking. Over to you, Wanjiru.
Thank you, Abdi. Just want to address my question to Senior Counsel Mother Karua. And before I ask a question, I just want to give her flowers for all the work she's done and all the mentoring and inspiration she's been for over the years. I personally has been inspired a lot by her ever since I first set my eyes on her in the Nakuru Road Courts. That was a long time ago. Anyway, my question is about healthcare and the state of healthcare. And my question is, with the state of the judiciary as it is now, do not get, adequate health care. Now, we watched a child who died in Longisa Hospital in Bomet due to negligence, and the parents had been asked to pay 500 shillings, which they could not afford. Also, people are paying into the SHIF and still going into hospitals and not getting medical care. So what recourse do citizens have? Can citizens sue county governments, and can they sue the national government for lack of healthcare? Because people are dying. So if you take your family to the hospital and they die because of negligence or because of lack of medical attention due to the failure of SHIF, do citizens have any recourse to this? Thank you.
Thank you, Wanjiru. Before I hand over to Redemptor, Redemptor also was talking about the book, Honorable Mother Karua, Your Memo, Against the Tide. So there is a question for you from our listeners that I know the book takes us through a journey from a humble beginning to becoming a national figure. The question for you was, why did you write the book? Why did you decide to write it now? What do you hope to achieve with the release of this book? And I know the highlights about resilience in the face of challenges, lessons from experiences. What lessons or experiences would you like to pass to Kenyans, particularly on the ask in fighting corruption, impunity, and promoting good governance?